We got a big transfer for you to learn about coming out of the state of Mississippi in the transfer portal. Let's give you the facts that you need to know and talk about what it means for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. War Eagle, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Kyle here at E2C Network, where we share the Auburn experience. As you're watching or listening today about this particular topic, be sure to drop a comment down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts as we're sharing ours. Coming into this commitment just a few days earlier, Auburn had a double dose in the transfer portal. Those names were Rico Walker and Trill Carter. We've done some videos about those that you should check out if you haven't. But for today's video, we are focusing on the 7th commitment in the transfer portal. This one comes to us by way of Mississippi State, an offensive lineman by the name of Percy Lewis, who will now be joining Auburn with 1 year of eligibility. He is a humongous, and I do mean humongous, product in terms of measurables, which we're going to talk about, a pure Mississippi State of Mississippi product. And of course, we got a lot of facts that we want to share with you about him. Let's start off like we normally do by talking about the timeline of events that brought us to the point of him committing to Auburn football. Normally we look at their high school to start off with, but we're going to really start with JUCO level here. That's the most important starting place for us because it's a familiar name, Mississippi Gulf Community College. You're probably familiar with that if you're familiar with recruiting. A lot of Auburn prospects have come from there. He spent the 2020-21 season there at that community college before getting a lot of attention. In fact, Auburn tried to get in the mix January of 2021, offering him. He eventually committed to Oregon. That's how much attention he was getting, but then decommitted after the Mississippi schools got involved more heavily and eventually decommitted from Oregon and then signed with Mississippi State, who he would spend the next 2 seasons with playing for the Bulldogs before eventually deciding that he wanted one more stop for what would presumably be his final year of eligibility. Now that you know how I got here, let's give you some more facts to know about Percy Lewis. In high school, he was considered a 4-star offensive lineman out of Salis, Mississippi, and played for McAdams High School. As a transfer, he's now considered a 3-star prospect. His measurables are listed at 345 pounds, approximately 6'8". You heard me right, 6'8" is his height. That puts him very nicely at the offensive tackle position, which is where he's played most of his career. Now let's back up those facts with a few stats about Percy Lewis. Always difficult to get individual stats for offensive linemen, but we'll work with what we got here. We'll look at how often did he start. At Mississippi State, played in 25 total games and started in 8 of them, with the majority of those being in his 2023 final season with the Bulldogs. During that season, he also made the College Football Network's All-SEC Honorable Mention team. And then if you try to look at how the team performed, maybe what he contributed to, I really wouldn't read too much into that. Mississippi State has had pretty rough last 2 years. And lastly, in the facts to know about Percy Lewis section, I want to talk about the storylines around his commitment. Where I focus on here is what this means for rebuilding the offensive line. And you may say he's only going to be around for presumably 1 year. How much can he really help? Well, he is helping that younger group that we've been building get more time to continue to get comfortable and build up to be that solid foundation of the offensive line. I also look to the story of his commitment, where you don't give up on somebody if they don't choose you to start with, especially in the day and age of the transfer portal. I mean, Auburn had an opportunity, they offered him, didn't really work out, but came back around and obviously made sense for him now. So you just never really give up on it. Now that you got all the facts that you need to know about Percy Lewis, let's now focus on what his commitment means for the Auburn Tigers. And we always start off by looking at the class numbers for the 2024 class, obviously. As of the time of his commitment and nothing else, it meant 28 total commits. 7 of those obviously were transfers, as we made him the 7th overall. And then you've also got 12 on offense, 4 offensive linemen, and presumably 3 of those would be offensive tackles. Next, let's talk about the future. What does his commitment mean for the future of this depth chart? Where is he going to fit into all this? Well, you kind of have to look at who's here still, who's coming up. You still got names like Isaiah Miller and Dylan Wade, and just keep in mind, we're assuming that these guys are going to stay at the tackle position. There's probably going to be some mix and match, as there was even last season, but we'll start there. Even a guy like Jaden Muskrat, who can probably slide into a tackle position too. So those are some names that he'll have to compete with, although I think his measurables are really going to give him a leg up on finding some significant playing time, maybe even starting time. There's also names that are going to be coming up, like Tyler Johnson, Favor, and Wynn. So you can see, this is not a bare cupboard, but it is obviously somewhere where he can probably fit in quite nicely to find some playing time especially with his experience. I always like to mention where these recruits come from in terms of the recruiting pipelines, what it means for building up the future of Auburn's recruiting. And for Percy Lewis coming from the state of Mississippi, this makes him the third in this class from Mississippi. Those other ones would be Laquan Robinson and Jamonta Waller. We don't always go dip into Mississippi a ton, but being so close, it's nice to know that we can go and get who we want, and we've obviously done that this season. And finally, let's talk about what the commitment of Percy Lewis might mean for the rest of the 2024 class. Now, if you break this thing down, you're going to see that there is 17 offensive linemen approximately on the roster right now. 14 of those, in my estimation, are going to be the ones that likely see the playing time. Let's break that 14 down even further. That's 3 seniors, 3 juniors, 3 sophomores, and 5 freshmen. So as you can see, the room is pretty full. The spots that have already been vacated by those leaving in the transfer portal or graduating have been mostly filled. I'm not saying that we are done, because Trevon Reed always tells us that we're not done yet, but it kind of does seem like we don't necessarily need anybody else. Now, if the opportunity presents itself, you always take some when it comes to offensive linemen, because it's always a place that you could use more help. So there you have it, my thoughts on your 7th commitment in the transfer portal for Auburn football, Percy Lewis. I want to know your thoughts about him in the comments section below. As you're doing that, always consider checking out the links in our description of our YouTube videos for ways that you can help support us here at E2C Network, where we share the Auburn experience. War Eagle.